Today I spoke to GB News about the potential of beer shortages. The truth is that the weather has been playing havoc with food production in Britain over the last 18 months, but that's not the only problem that we're experiencing. We also have a lot of problems, mainly because of Brexit and also because of the Ukraine war pushing up inflation.
Now, Britain is apparently on the brink of a beer shortage after we were caught out on the hop by bad weather.
Caught on the hop. Industry experts fear a shortage of wheat beers, bread and cereals, causing a heavy reliance on foreign imports.
Well, record rainfall means that the nation is set for one of its worst harvests since records began. Back in 1983, wheat crops will be cut by almost a fifth.
I find it hard to believe records only began in 1983. But will pubs really be without beer this Christmas? I'm sure the Victorians had records.
I'm sure.
Well, we're joined now by Liz Webster, the founder of the campaign group Save British Farming. Liz, it's been a tough harvest. Am I going to feel that when I pay for beer in a pub?
Yes, I mean, all foods, actually, all British foods are under a lot of stress for a variety of different reasons, but certainly the weather over the last 18 months has been really challenging. It's becoming too difficult and too risky to grow food in Britain. We've lost support because we left the European Union, and policy has been encouraging us to go into greening schemes. And when the weather adds insult to injury, as it has in the last 18 months, then farmers are just giving up because the risk is too great. So, I mean, here on this farm, last winter, what we did drill, for the wheat that we did drill, rotted, and, then the fields became too wet to do the rest of the drilling. So this year, harvest, actually, for me personally, has been quite easy because we haven't had much to harvest. So it's been a fairly quiet time. But yes, it is going to have an impact.
I mean,
and
Liz, not to
Ukraine war.
Not to be harsh to British farmers, but presumably we can make up the loss by just importing more beer from abroad.
Well, we can, but there's a lot of stress on the global markets because of the Ukraine-Russia war. So there's a lot of volatility. But yes, the reality of where the direction of travel for British farming, which is your beer, your food, everything you consume, your milk, everything, it means that you're going to be eating more imported products, yes. And we'll have less food security, which is a huge concern going forward, because if the war, as the climate becomes more unstable, it means relying on imports can be risky. As we saw with the COVID, the impacts of COVID, that you can't always assume that you're going to be able to get those imports. And that's the lesson that we learned in the last two world wars, which is why we put a big effort into food production. But that, sadly, has not happened. And support for farming has been withdrawn. And the support that we have got is encouraging us to do greening schemes. So farmers are taking land out of production for greening schemes, which makes little sense, but that is why there's a shortage of food, and it's going to get worse going forward.
Because you can't actually farm your whole farm. It has to be used for other purposes, as dictated by the government. Liz, we're going to have to end it there. Would love to speak to you again. Founder of campaign group Save British Farming, that's Liz Webster.
Absolutely, and I have been told in my ear that detailed records did begin in
Food production has been shrinking in Britain for some considerable time. Imports have been increasing for really over 2 decades. But since Brexit, that has been expedited because of the loss of subsidy and the loss of control of our borders. We've got friction, we have non-tariff barriers with our biggest market to export, as well as we've had an unfair, unlevel playing field because our competitors have been able to export to Britain without the same barriers until recently. And even now, those barriers aren't equalised. So all in all, these things have meant that growing food in Britain is too difficult, too risky. And the Ukraine war and COVID, which caused inflation, have only exacerbated that problem. Plus, the government have been offering support for greening environmental schemes, which means that farmers are more likely to take those schemes because they're less risk than growing food. And in essence, this impacts you, the people, because you're paying more for imported food. And if there are further global food shortages, it means that prices will really hike even further, and we may face considerable food shortages. Not having control of your food, as in not having food sovereignty, means that you are a very weak country, because other countries can hold you to ransom for food, otherwise you face chaos. And this is not a comfortable position to be in, as we learned in the last war, when we did have control of food because we had an empire. We no longer have an empire now, which means that if we don't have enough food, we are at the mercy of world markets. And sadly, the new government are not showing signs at the moment of understanding this issue either.